So we want to welcome everyone for joining us today. Thank you for putting your comments in the chat too. Just let us know what position you have and what state you're from. And we have some poll questions. Right now we have about 50 of you that have answered it so far. The first question we asked was how many of you have ever helped in a sweep or a targeted IDR effort, help plan one? And it looks like we're right about half and half. Some of you have never done it, some of you have. Have you ever participated in one? 41% of you say yes, 59% say no. And then we had various reasons why you might participate in a sweep or an IDR effort. And 40% of you said to find more children during a busy season. So that seems to be the biggest reason. There was an other, which was the next reason, and then to canvass an area that hadn't been canvassed before and to help train new staff. And do you feel comfortable planning? 35% say yes, 16% say no, and 49% say they do not know. So hopefully this training will be helpful to you. I'm going to go ahead and end that. I'll just keep the poll in the background. So if anyone wants to answer that, they can. So this is a webinar, so you can't unmute yourself, but you can use the chat box, and please put any questions that you have. I'll try to pay close attention to those and respond to those throughout the training. And so we're going to share kind of some best practices for sweeps. There can be, or for efforts, I'm going to just call it an effort from here on out. And so this session really is just to give some ideas. And at the same time, we'll be using the chat box for you guys to put your comments and share ideas as we go along. So if you have never planned one, you're in the right spot. If you've planned one, hopefully you're in the right spot. We'll give you some ideas there. And if you're not sure, hopefully you'll gain some information from this today. So a lot of the things that we're talking about also can be very much related to covering your own area thoroughly. It's just a lot of times in a specific targeted effort, you have just a limited amount of time that you're covering a particular place. And so it is applicable, and you can kind of, figure out how you want to, apply it to what you do. So I'm going to give a definition of what we mean by a sweep or an effort. So anytime you bring in other staff from other areas to assist in recruitment in an area that's not really their normal one to cover. Or you could also say, I was just noticed Alejandro from Kansas. I know during COVID, they did some phone sweeps where they would have people kind of work on the same area or the same effort or the same type of activity. And so this can be, our idea of what we're talking about is just when you're bringing other people in and you're doing a concentrated effort to try to cover specific areas. And so a lot of the things we're going to be mentioning are related to that. So in order to get started, let's say right now you're one of the people that's saying, I really don't know what to do with this. I'm not sure where to go. You want to make sure that you have a purpose. My background comes from working in Tennessee, as many of you know. I was there for many years, and much of my job in the early years that I was there was to canvass areas of the state where we didn't have any documents from anyone else. No one knew anything about agriculture in that particular area, and it was my job to go out there, find it as quick as possible until we started to have more knowledge of the state and we could have more recruiters and more students identified. And so I remember in the very beginning just showing up in a county and having no idea where to look, and then realizing, there's some specific things that I should be looking at. And so years ago, I would look at how many ethnic stores were in a particular community. If there were none, where I was, for example, most of the families were coming specifically from Mexico or from Guatemala. Every state is different. Every population is different. They could be someone that's, lived in Tennessee all their life and moved to different places. So what I'm going to share is some of the things from my own personal experience, but we realize that every single state is unique, and each one of you will have challenges in ways that you have to do these things. And so hopefully the tips we share will be applicable to all, but we do understand that not everything will work the same way that it does in some states. So every effort should have a goal. You should have a purpose that you clearly want to be able to bring additional staff in for this X, Y, and Z purpose. And always behind everything that we should be always thinking about how we can be most cost effective. And so sometimes we can get away from this and be looking more at what's most comfortable for the recruiter or most comfortable for, or what we've always done. But the idea that we should be cost effective should be behind everything we do. We should all be good stewards of MEP funds. And I feel like the area of IDR can become so cumbersome and so big if we're not careful that it will really limit the amount of services that we provide kids. And we never want to forget that the reason we have Migrant Ed is to help the kids that this program is designed for. And so it says here, we should never forget, the more streamlined our approach to IDR, identification recruitment is, the more quality services we should be able to provide, because hopefully there'll be funds, plenty of funds left over to provide those services. So this really, anytime that we do an effort, an IDR effort, it should be an exercise in making our dollars stretch. This should be part of our process of what we're thinking, how we design it, why we're doing it. All of that should be in the back of our mind. And so I know this is common sense, but at the same time, give me, and if you want to put it in the chat box, give me some ideas of why a sweep or an effort was conducted in your state, or why you would plan one. So if you want to go ahead and throw those in the chat box, I'll pay attention to that. So I have some on here, some examples of ones that are very common. Sometimes it's during a slow time of the year and you feel like there's a part of your state that you're not sure if, if you need a recruiter there, or you feel like it hasn't been canvassed for a while. Or there are specific entities such as meat processing or poultry processing that you can work with. Maybe if you're a state that has both seasonal and temporary work, maybe you focus a whole bunch of your efforts in the summer on those seasonal jobs, and then you switch right over in the fall to go ahead and have the focus be on the those temporary jobs. And so I see some comments here. It says canvas areas that have not been, really to canvas areas that have not been canvassed for a while. Alejandro says next week we're going to Dodge City. After enrollment, they received more than 400 home language surveys from new enrolled students. So you can see that's a perfect example of, there is greater need than maybe 1 or 2 staff can handle. And so you can bring extra staff in for that. Also to increase recruitment and to do a sweep. Maybe you're covering due to lack of staff. Emily says, update your farm housing list, really check on quality control. Sam says, busy time, central Wisconsin has a large group of veggie workers. So getting out in that area in early summer, it helps us cover the area faster. Maybe you have a summer program that's happening and you have, we used to have a very short window between when our summer programs happened and when our families came. And so an example in Tennessee was there was particular places where there was a lot of tomato workers. And so they would come maybe July 4th weekend, and our summer program would start 2 weeks later, and we'd make sure that we had multiple staff canvassing the area to get everybody signed up for the program and found as quick as possible. And so then the recruiter would continue as soon as that effort was done, but there was no way that the person could get it all done just themselves. Sarah says to canvass an area that's not been done. Manuel says new staff at schools, not aware of NEP, new school secretaries. Wilson says another reason the number is overwhelming. There might be the numbers are overwhelming for one recruiter to just work in those specific counties. So you can see a lot of the things that you have mentioned here are some things that I have on the slides. So one of the biggest reasons is it's the busiest time of year, and there's a chance that eligible families or youth can be missed. Maybe they're there for a very short window. And so you can see the reasons why you might bring in a lot of extra staff or multiple staff or just 1 or 2 is varied, but there can be many different reasons. Maybe you're conducting a training in an area where additional support is needed to raise the capacity of the recruiters in the area. Maybe you need to determine quickly a new area of work that needs to be done. You've heard about some new, like Alejandro just mentioned, you have a whole bunch of surveys. So there's a lot of different reasons that you want to do this. And so when you go and start really looking at it, we're going to mention over and over in this webinar what we consider what are fundamental elements to make sure that should happen in these type of efforts. And so you'll see something similar each time that one of these fundamental elements comes up. Shakira says one of the reasons for a sweep could be low recruitment in the area. Yeah. So one of the things you're going to think about is the best time to conduct these efforts or these sweeps. And so let's just take Shakira's example. There's low recruitment in an area. I'm not going to put a sweep or an effort happening in that area and when the recruiters are all busy in their own areas with plenty to do. I'm going to, I might pull 1, pull 2, but I'm not going to take everybody off of something when they can be finding families unless there is a real reason to show, hey, this is the best time for me to really be able to do this. So you want to look at what season, what time of the month, what time of the week, how long staff will work each day, how far will they travel, will they work in pairs or alone? So I'm thinking of all of these things in my design. So overarching, when is the best time for this to happen? What's going on? What time of the month can be helpful too? What time of the week? All of these things are something that I'm kind of thinking of in my design. So here's an example of looking at how to be cost effective. And so I realize that this is a challenge for everybody. And so this was something in Tennessee, we were super underfunded. And so we were always trying to figure out, like, how can we get the most work time out of staff. When they have to go to areas, a lot of times they're far away. And this can happen with efforts also. You're all centrally located, maybe at a hotel, and you go out and you do different work each day. And so people can schedule these very different. They can say, okay, we're going to have staff work for a week. They're going to work pretty much generally 8 to 5 each day. And the same thought process can go on to how we use our staff normally. We're going to have work 8 to 5, and it is a little bit far where they need to go, but this is the best place we can get them in the hotel. And so maybe if they're 2 hours away, they're driving 4 hours and their work time is 4 hours. So you can say, well, that obviously is not the most effective way. We know that flexibility is required with migrant ed, that a lot of things can happen. Sometimes recruiters need to be out there very early. Sometimes they need to be out there very late. But on an effort that you're organized, a lot of times it's both. So here's another example. Staff work 10 hours for 4 days. They're going to work each day 8 to 7. They'll still have to drive. We're just given an example of 2 hours travel time. Now, of course, you can try to put them closer and not have them travel, and that would be even more effective. But I was just to try to show a point right here. So then their daily drive time is still 4 hours. Their work time is now 6 hours. And so you can see that I've added an extra 4 hours a week that I'd be able to get because that they're driving less and they're working more. So maybe we say, you know what, instead of 4 days, we're going to push it to 3 days. Now, these are going to be long, intensive days, and they still have this distance, but look at the difference in how much work I'll be able to get from. I've added an extra 7 hours, almost a full day in like regular day standards that I can get out of them if they're able to go those longer days. So we always try, for example, to do those long days to say, we'll bring staff in, they're going to work really hard for those 3 days, and then they get a break. And so we did this actually in Tennessee, where they would have 3 days a week that they'd be out in the field. And we required 1 weekend day. This was not for an effort. This was just regular recruiters. And then they would have, 3 12-hour shifts, and then they would do, 4 hours in the office, kind of getting ready for the next week. And so each state can do this totally different, but this is just an example of some of the thought process that we could be doing when we're trying to be cost effective with those ways that we're planning staff. I have seen programs literally have people drive 6 hours, spend 2 hours there, and come back. And they'll say, well, we don't have a lot to do in the area. We always suggest figure out absolutely everything you could do in the area and make that time count. And so in 2 hours, you're not going to canvas hardly anything. So what can you do to make sure that you're really using that time well? Let me see if I skipped some. I skipped a bunch. Let's see. How did I do that? There we go. Okay. It says an example is, which is more effective. It says extremely important to ensure sweeps get the most of the field work time possible. Recruiters should not be traveling long hours and working short hours. Maximize the time. Ensure all of your efforts keep this in focus. So if anyone has some tips that they have as far as really kind of thinking of things that they can help be more cost effective, go ahead and put those in the chat box, and we'll mention those as they come in. So anything that you do to kind of save funds or organize so that in a way that you think can kind of streamline efforts. Next fundamental element is, who is your lead? I'm a real big believer of having a lead in the field. Sometimes you can have a lead that's in another place that's kind of telling you, hey, try this or try this. And a lot of times that's what has to happen. But if you can have an in-field lead to see exactly what's happening and to help pivot if things are not working, it can be really helpful to have that person be an experienced recruiter, experienced trainer as the lead in your field. So this person shouldn't just be leading from an office, but they should be working out with staff. Maybe you decided to partner up 2 recruiters, and then this lead is able to see like, hey, maybe I should, this one could really learn from this one. Or maybe the lead is going out and providing training to different recruiters if you're doing this in pairs. Now, it may not be ideal to make it in pairs. It may be that everyone's working by themselves. I've got a comment. It says, a lot of places visited may have workers, but they are over age or graduated from high school or have lived in the area too long. Found a lot of meat processing that were not temporary, but work would slow down in winter months, and we keep looking. So this could be another reason why you could be kind of conducting one of those efforts. Alejandro says, I think this is in ways to kind of streamline, pre-screen the area a couple weeks ahead. Very good. So you're looking at what's already going on there. You're talking to people. This can include H-2A orders, community resources to visit. So when your people come, you have a plan. You have specific things that you're wanting them to do. And so that is super helpful when you're kind of looking at conducting these efforts. So my next slide goes right into that and to Alejandro's comment. It says, there should always be someone who's doing the homework for this week. So we shouldn't just like say, you know what, we don't know about this area. Let's just, we've got this farm list. Let's just go ahead and canvass it. You can do that, but it would be very helpful to already know, maybe you've talked to people locally, you've already got some leads on some of the larger farms. And so when you're thinking of the scheduling, you're thinking of determining what efforts can be done if there's a distinction in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. So for example, in the idea that you have all of these surveys that you need to follow up from the schools, maybe you're figuring out, okay, we're gonna call families, we're gonna do a lot of this over the phone, or we're gonna go and make sure that maybe it's a meat processing area. And so you're looking at when shift changes are, and you're saying, well, I should have some morning people, I should have some afternoon people. You're thinking about the differences. If I'm going out to farms, morning is ideal. If I'm visiting families, afternoons, evenings, after kids get home from school, or in the evenings when both parents are home, you want to really be thinking about what efforts should be happening at each time of day. What happens if the weather changes? If you're doing a sweep for seasonal areas, then it's a very different places that you should be visiting when the weather's bad. And so you can think about that. I once had to do a re-interview. I was in the state of Georgia, and it was during there was tornadoes, there was all this crazy stuff happening, and I could find everybody home because no one was wanting to get out. Now, it was not ideal always for me as a re-interviewer to be out in that, but it was super effective because everyone was home. And so sometimes changes in weather can make you think of different ways that you should recruit. Maybe you're visiting more laundromats, you're doing more things that people would be doing when they're off and not at work in some jobs. So determine what you do if you need to make changes to the schedule or effort focus day by day. So you go back to that lead. Will your lead have the power to be able to say, hey, you know what, we need to take a new approach? Are they going to be meeting each night with the people to say, how did it go today? What can you do? And kind of helping them make a game plan. How are you going to use that person, and how will you make a plan A and plan B and plan C if you need to? So also in this, kind of fundamental elements is the training design. So you always want to make sure that if you have an effort or an opportunity to train people, that you're thinking about what training they need. And you want to determine who's the best one to provide that, what activities should be done related to that while they're out in the field. For example, going back to Alejandro's idea of kind of pre-screening and looking at what needs to happen. Maybe I have a recruiter that's really uncomfortable going to farms. And so I'm going to intentionally put that recruiter with someone that's very good at going in farms, and they're going to cover a specific area related to the farms. I was just working in a state recently, just a couple of weeks ago, and one of the staff mentioned that they love to contact farmers over the phone. And I thought, that's not what I like to do. I feel like they could shut me down. And so I said, what do you do, to get them to talk to you? And this particular person works for a college or an institution so she calls and says, hey, are you guys hiring? And so the farm's like, well, and she tells them where she's from, are you guys hiring at all? And then the farm will say, owner will say, actually right now we are looking. Do you guys possibly know of somebody that might be looking for work? And she says, well, I don't really know of anyone that's looking for work, but I do have a program for a lot of your workers. And so she just transitioned. I usually would start and be like, hey, I work with a program that works with families that have been here a limited amount of time. But her approach of, hey, are you guys hiring? We're just trying to figure out which farms are hiring right now because we have a program that helps workers. So just the hiring, mentioning the hiring put people a little bit off guard, and they're a little bit more comfortable talking because most farms right now across the country are looking for workers. And so she said, everywhere I go, I call and they haven't been shut down. And so maybe you have someone that's very good about that, and you want other people to get, comfortable with learning how these different approaches. Lori says driving around in unfamiliar country roads takes longer than what Google Maps says. So yes, many times you want to make sure that you're planning an area or a radius that they're going to work on. You would never want, I've been to another state at one point that they said one of their favorite ways to conduct IDR was to drive around and look for license plates. You don't want to be doing that. You want to be, unless it's a place that you already know you need to visit the motels or the, apartment complexes, and then you're looking at the license plates. You want to have, real concrete places that you're going and reasons and things that you're wanting to accomplish. And that goes back to your homework that you're trying to do. Then there is the idea that once you're there, you want to make sure that you're thoroughly canvassing an area. So maybe you're like, hey, I want to go to all these farms and we have this farm list and we really want to clean things up with this farm list and see who's eligible and who's not, which farms we should be visiting. But then there can be a lead right there next to you, but you can be too focused on driving from one place to another and you don't canvass everything around. So Wilson puts follow that van. I know a lot of us at different times have found we are on our way to something else, and then we see that there's housing that looks like possibly it could be migrant housing. Or there is a van of workers and you think, I wonder where they're going. One of the things that really successful recruiters know how to do is how to thoroughly canvass and ask questions everywhere they go. So we will only find all the migrant families and youth if we canvass all of the community. So if I only do farms, I'm going to miss people who are not at work. If I only do schools, I'm going to miss people who never signed up for school. If I only do community agencies, I'm going to miss the leads from the school and from the farms. If I only do housing, some people are not going to be home when I get there. So you have to look at all of those different areas, and like Wilson says, follow them to Walmart and greet them when they get out. And then there's those places in the community that they're going to visit. So we have to be super thorough. Same thing happens when you're on a targeted effort that you're conducting. So I have my purpose, I have my place where I'm going. But if I stop at a house, let's say I had a lead for a family and I knock on the door and it's not who's supposed to be there, I'm still going to ask them, hey, this is what we're doing. We work with families that are new to the area, that work in agriculture. Do you know if any of your neighbors are new? Do you know if any of the farms locally are hiring? Everyone knows more about their community than we probably do if we're not living in that community. So we want to make sure that we ask those questions. So another one of these fundamental elements is provide specific locations and places that should be visited. So it can be super helpful to have a sweep map, a map that you're places that is specifically assigned to a particular recruiter. And you want to make sure that that map is up to date. You want to make sure it's the right time to send them to these locations. Maybe you're really stuck on a temporary type of work right now, but seasonal jobs are happening all over the place and you can miss them because you're just focused on going to this one particular place. So maybe right now you're saying, I have no idea where I'm supposed to find lists or maps for my state. I'm going to show you real quick. Most of you are probably aware of this, but just real fast. I'm going to go ahead and share this. On the IDRC website, if you scroll down, we have some portals. I'm going to throw this into the chat box. Put this in here. Most of you know, but just in case there's anybody that doesn't know, if you click on the agriculture information portal, you will find your state on there. Let's go to Kansas because I've seen a few things from Kansas on here. If you click on your state, we have a whole bunch of lists for you. We have, if you're an IDRC state, we developed a listing of everything we could possibly find, but you're going to want to make sure that that this is actually, this is your state, that these are the, if I'm Alejandro and I'm the IDNR coordinator, I may take a look at this map and it's so much. And so, or this list, I'm going to give my staff an idea of which ones I want to focus on first. So some of you guys are fortunate enough, make sure I'm sharing it the right thing, that on their list, it'll tell you how many people they employ. This is a good place to start. Start with the bigger ones first, and then you'll work your way down. If you're not an IDRC state, we still have the farm contractors list and a map. All the maps, when you open them up, these are batch geo maps. They're all capital IDRC maps. I need to get rid of that. Capital IDRC is the access. Why is it? No thanks. So why is it not open? It should open. The stupid thing is wanting me to. Let me go back.
I'll check it out.
Okay, that one's not. Let's open this one. It could be that I'm. Okay, so here's an example of a map. So this map is Kansas H2A housing. So this exists for every single state. And if I'm a recruiter and I don't have a map, I can click on these and the information will come up, and I can also use my device. If you have an Apple phone, you can download the free Batch Geo app. If you have an Android, you just click on it and it'll take you navigation to get to that place. So we have the H2A maps, we have rural housing list, we have mobile home parks, we have egg, poultry, and meat inspection sites. And then we have a whole bunch of different associations for your state that you can reach out and see if they have meetings, things like that. But it's not going to be super helpful for you to just have all these separate maps. We suggest that you download these and you make your own Google map. And so that is one of the things that we really enjoy using at IDRC. We've always done the maps. In Tennessee, years ago, I had some staff that, make sure I'm sharing the right thing, had some staff that made maps before I ever knew anything about it. I had one of our recruiters that was super good about that. And so she made maps and we were like, wow, this is super helpful. This was like 15 years ago. The maps, you want to have your own map that you're working on. And so this is an example of a recruitment map that we had. And so this, this particular, if I was a recruiter, I would know that I needed to visit everything within this area and then canvas everything within this area. So we can only find so many things online. So the recruiter should go out and come back with more information than we're able to provide. And so you want to make sure that you have these maps that they can use on their phone. I had someone say, yeah, these maps are really cool, but they're not cool unless you have them on your map, on your phone. And then as a recruiter, I can go out and see, hey, I've got this farm or this farm, and I can update those. And so maybe you're wondering how on earth you can do those kind of maps. This particular presentation will be emailed out to everybody that participates in this, and we'll also have it on our webinar page. But we have 3 trainings on how to make maps. One of them also mentions different mapping tools that you can use. Another one, it gives examples of how states use the maps, but each one of these will show you how to actually create your map. And so you can go on and pull down those lists that we already have on the portal and use those however it helps you. So feel free to access those. So one of my pet peeves is then we get stuck only on the map. So we're like, oh, I've got to go from here to here, or we get done and people are like, oh, I did everything on the map. Well, if you're doing it right, you go to a farm and then you look around and they might be somewhere where that you need to stop on the way to the next farm or on the way to the next community agency, or you go to community agency and they suggest that you should go to this apartment complex. There should be leads that you're getting from your work out in the field. So the map is just to get you started. It is not the end of what you should be doing. So not all leads are on the map. So many, many, many things in a community are not yet known. Another thing, maybe on the map, you show up and it's someone's house and it was supposed to be a business. And you say, I'm not going here. This is a business. But I had an experience last year. I was in New Mexico and there was this mansion. It was like this huge mansion and it was supposed to be for a dairy. And we were like, this is interesting. And so we went to the door and on the door was the name of the family. And we were like, that's the same name of the guy that's supposed to be from the dairy, because we had heard from visiting all these different dairies, this lead of this possible guy who was the owner. We didn't find him in his office. Long story short, the guy in the house owned 6 different dairies and gave us permission to talk to his guy that was in charge at each one of those dairies. And so this mansion turned into be this owner who also had several sons who owned other dairies. And so it would have been one of those ones that I might have pulled up and like, this doesn't count. But because I was trying to train a new person about how to follow everything, we went in and we followed it. And the guy was very nice. And we wound up getting a lot, really good leads from that. So if you want to, in the chat box, think of something that you've learned while you were out recruiting just because you asked. And maybe it was a random person that you asked, or it was a long shot. Can you think of a time that you asked something and somebody gave you that information? So Alejandro says, funny story, sweeping in Southeast area in Missouri. I almost recruited by accident field workers in Pocahontas, Arkansas at the border. Having a map is very important. Very true. You can cross over lines. That would be somebody's area. I'm sure Arkansas wouldn't mind if you had let them know if there was any new families and shared it, but that's a very good example of how those maps can be helpful. So if you have something that you learned just because you asked, this happened to me over and over and over and over in Tennessee. Like I would show up, and somebody would not be there, who I thought was there. And I'd ask the person right there at the house and they'd say, oh, well, you should go here, or you should go there. And over and over and over, I finally realized that everyone around that in that community knew more about the community than I did. And if I would just ask the right questions. So I wouldn't just say, hey, is there agriculture in this community? I would do my homework to try to know that there was work with pigs, or that there was work with green beans. And I could say, do you know where the green bean farmers are in this community? And they would. So I would try to think of specific things that I needed to know and ask specific questions. And that was very helpful for me. So who knows what in a community? Churches. Many times churches know general information about the population. Health programs. They have people coming in and out. There are farm worker health programs across this country where they're trying to track the number of farm workers that they work with. The ag extension, a lot of times knows what specific agriculture is happening in the community. A lot of times they won't give you lists of farms, but if you say, hey, I'm wondering where, for example, in Tennessee, we had a lot of ag data on this one county that showed there were tons of beans in this particular area. And it was like snap beans. And we were thinking, where, it was an area we never found any workers. We'd never noticed anything. And so I went and talked to the ag extension and said, I can see there's tons of acreage of this, but where are the workers? Like, how do they do this? Now, unbeknownst to me, the county over had tons of workers that, were processing the beans in these little facilities, and we had signed them up. What I didn't know is all the beans from the county next door were transported to that particular county that I was aware of. Now, I thought the agriculture was from that same community, same area. I had no idea it came from next door. And so looking at the ag data, I could then kind of put the pieces together, but it was the ag extension officer said, no, none of those are, those are all mechanized, how they pick, they then process them in the bean sheds in this other area. Remember your schools, they know about students moving in and out. They can also provide you good leads. Chamber of Commerce, I learned the hard way from showing up and being like, we're trying to find the agriculture in the community. Well, where I live, there's a lot of soy and a lot of corn that everyone knows about, but that's not who we're looking for. Those are not the kind of jobs that, so I had to be much more specific about asking them, in my particular area would be like, hey, do you know where the nurseries, the plant nurseries are in this area? So sometimes you have to make sure that you do your homework about the questions that you ask so that you can get the right kind of information from. The police, they know about populations moving in and out. They also know about what we call transitional housing, places that are easy to rent, that people come in and out. A lot of times they're very aware of those kind of places. They also know about population demographics and can have some good information for you. Different types of ethnic stores. You can learn about the populations that they serve and what kind of work they have. A lot of times they're very tied into, they know very well what's happening. I have here laundry areas. Says also a community agent, the Dollar General store. That was something that I had learned from one of the states, that they said they always make contact with the places that it's easiest for people to go in and get the supplies when they first move in. And so you want to find those stores that ag workers are going to shop at. And then if you can put a poster up, of course, that would be ideal. There was a comment I learned that smaller farmers share farm workforce, several days in one farm, other days in others. We often join efforts with the state's ag health recruiters, as well as field workers, and share leads. That's a great example of working with another partner agency. So then we talk about as this fundamental elements that need to be kind of included in your effort, planning, is the use of balanced recruitment techniques. So balanced recruitment, we just talked a little bit about canvassing area. It literally means that you're going to make sure that you're taking into consideration while you're out in the field, what's the housing, where are people going to live, where are the farms and agribusiness, so you have your maps, who are the community partners, and then can we do any of the homework, like Alejandro mentioned, of getting leads from the school before this effort happens. So how can we combine all four of these areas to make sure? Maria just mentioned temporary agencies. That's another really good example. If they're doing hiring, especially for processing plants, a lot of temporary agencies will do the hiring for the plants and workers will come through them. So you want to make sure that you're really thinking about all of those elements. Maybe time-wise, you don't have time to involve all of these areas, but you want that to be a deliberate choice that you didn't involve it, not just because you didn't think about why they should or shouldn't be there. You want to make sure if it's possible that you can look at all of those areas, then you can do that. One other thing is on the IDRC website, this is under the recruiter portal, learning portal. The work group from IDRC, which is made up of practitioners, IDNR practitioners from all over our 26 states, we came up with 4 modules on the best practices to work with schools, best practices to work with farms and agribusiness and fisheries, and then also how to thoroughly canvass housing. Like maybe you're thinking, I don't even know where to start with housing. Like, how do I know? So it has tips in there, like, for example, to go to like rent.com and figure out where the cheapest rent is in your community and see which apartments currently have vacancies, because a lot of times those are the places that people are coming in and out. It gives you specific ideas and things that you can do related to housing. Same thing with working in the community. And so these 4 modules, we suggest that all recruiters view that. And then when you're thinking about those types of efforts that you're organizing, you're making sure that if there's anything you can do in one of those areas, that you're able to really think that out beforehand and make that plan. Then let's say you go out there and you have all of this stuff that you've done, and the recruiters go out and they cover all of these different areas, and you get done and you say, that was really successful. One of the things you want to make sure that you're doing is that whoever is left to cover that area knows exactly where to go and who has been where and what happened. So let's say you canvass, I live in Warren County, Tennessee. It's one of the largest nursery areas in the country. Let's say we bring in 5 or 6 different recruiters and they all cover different areas of the county in 3 days. And maybe they find 56 kids and then they leave. So the success of the effort could be the 56 kids only, or it could be much, much wider than that. You have your 56 kids, you have everywhere that everyone went, you have the results of everything that everyone said, you have a list of all the follow-up that I need to do. You have a list of the places that no longer should be, on my map anymore because they don't exist. You have all the possible leads and things that people told you as you're out and about. And you have all the contact that was made with current families or families that were signed up with their needs also. So if I am bringing recruiters in from another area, I need them to think of the mindset that they are setting it up for someone who is coming behind. So if I show up and I'm working in a state, I'm saying, hey, my name is Jessica. I'm actually from Tennessee. I'm just here helping. There is another recruiter that will come after me. Their name is so-and-so. And so I'm just helping canvass the area. So that person knows the next time it's going to be a different face. I'm still laying the groundwork for them. And I'm going to approach it a little bit different. Like, I'm not going to go out and talk to this guy's workers without getting permission in most cases, because I want to help build that relationship and not have the door shut forever for the program. So if I'm just thinking about numbers, I'm going to go find them absolutely anywhere that I possibly can. But if I'm thinking about numbers and I'm thinking about setting it up for the next person, I'm deliberate in the conversations that I have. I'm deliberate in my approach. And really, we should be like this all the time. I'm deliberate in trying to build those relationships. So next time that recruiter can literally just call this particular place and get in, rather than they say, oh yeah, I remember that lady. She went and did this and this and this, and I don't really want to have you guys here again. So you want to make sure that you're thinking of all the complete effort impacts that this can have. So another fundamental element, you want to make sure, I think I just mentioned this, we also want to document. You want to keep those records. So you want to have some sort of tool that everyone is providing a daily report. They're putting all those contacts. Maybe they're doing visit reports. If you're an IDRC state, we use Connect Team for a lot of these kind of things. You can use whatever tool works for you to gather that information and make sure that you're building a historical record of what's happened and that it can be accessed by staff in the future. So like it says here, if you're trying to build for those that come after you, you're making sure that you're explaining there'll be more staff that's coming. You're making sure that you're doing things that really open the doors and don't shut them. And so you may not say, well, I'm kind of an ask permission later person. You want to make sure that you're thinking out the best way to build those relationships and making sure that you're not shutting the door for that recruiter afterwards. So ideally, if we're successful, those recruiters can give me a list of all of these different things, and then someone's got to do that follow-up. So I've seen this happen before too, where we've done a really good sweep and we've given this information to the recruiter, and then you follow up 3 weeks later and say, hey, did you go to that farm? They said that you could go that Thursday. How did that go? Oh, I got busy and I never followed up. Or, oh, I'm not sure. I'm just overwhelmed with what I have to do. So make sure if you do these efforts that you also have a plan for what happens when you leave, and that it's a must-do plan. It's not something that, it's almost like you have the people that are coming in, you have their plan, and then whoever's left over to follow up, you have this effort continuing on until all of those things are followed up. And so I think sometimes we can focus only on that first thing, and then we don't go anywhere with what we learn, and that should not be the case. Another thing to think about is the materials that you're going to leave in the community. So going back to the idea that recruiters come to my area, one of the problems that we have as a program is most of the time people have never heard of us. So you show up and you're trying to convince them that this is a real program, that this really exists, and that we really do offer these services. The better we are about marketing and leaving that materials, the next time a recruiter comes, it will not be the first time that that person has heard of the program. So of course, high quality services, there is nothing that will compete with how good that is to get word of mouth all over the community. So you want that to be just a given. But then you want to make sure that the materials that you're giving out about the program continue to help you recruit even when you're gone. So you want to be deliberate and think about those materials. Think about what you're going to post. One of the things we always tell recruiters is, let's say you show up at a plant nursery and you have in your mind the layers of things that you're going to ask them to see if you can talk to the workers. The first thing I say is, hey, we're trying to work with a program. We work with a program that helps families that have been here a short amount of time, the last 3 years, that have moved specifically for agriculture. would it be possible that we could ever talk to your workers during a break, before work, after work? No, that's not possible. Okay, well, we have a flyer. Would it be possible that we could put the flyer up into the, in the break room? No, we really don't want to do that. Well, is there anything you would ever, if we could give you anything that they could put with their checks or by the time clock, or could we put something on their vehicles? Just a list of things that possibly could happen. Or maybe you just want to put a poster in the bathroom where they go. So you want to be strategic, but you want to make sure that the materials that you then put up are helpful in what they're able to see. We do have a few sample ones on our website that are kind of general, that are tied to our referral tool. Just of some of the verbiage that you could use, or, of course you can create your own, but sometimes it's helpful to see examples of those types of, types of materials that you could give. We also have a training that we did during the pandemic that really focused on marketing tips. One of those things that, that we, a lot of times with Migrant Ed, you wear multiple hats and a lot of things that you're supposed to do. A lot of times we don't know how to do marketing. And so this goes through some of the principles of marketing and gives you some examples of companies and what their marketing approach is. And then you can kind of think of some things that you want to do yourself related to this. Of course, it's on our YouTube channel. And then in the presentation, there's a direct link to it that we can share with you. So another fundamental element is have your staff know of the resources that are in the community that they're working in. And so this is another area of homework. Alejandro mentioned it, of going through and thinking of those places that they should visit. And so some of you may think, I have no idea where to go with that. And so we do have, let's see if I can share, on the website, going back, all of our portals are right there on the front of the website. Sure, I'm sharing it. We have what we call our resource portal. So if we do things right, we have other agencies that can help us know what's going on. They can help provide referrals. They can help provide resources. And so our work groups from IDRC also worked on this project. And then Melissa, who works with us, also really did a ton of this work. These are resource guides that are electronic resource guides that are kind of the search engines of very different things for each state. So if I want to find out in Arizona where adult ed is, I'm able to click on this and find the adult ed programs for the state and find mine that are local. This is not something that I would share with families. This is more of a recruiter's thinking of, okay, when I go to this particular area, what churches are in this area? And so you can click on this and it'll be the Arizona church directory. And so I can put my town in here and then find those particular churches. There's also dental, there's domestic violence, there's driver's ed, everything that we could possibly think of that might be a referral or a resource that you want to share with a family, but also a possible partner. And so we tried to find the search engine type resources that were available for states, so that you could go in and find driver's ed closest to you, find educational rights or employment opportunities or eyeglasses. Maybe you want to find the locator for Lions clubs that are in your area. So we have a ton of resources: food banks, Head Start, health centers, HEP, housing. I mean, there's just lots, and this exists for every single state. And the idea is that you're figuring out who your possible partners are. And then as families mention needs, you've made contacts and in the community, and you can provide those leads to families. And so that was something we worked on this year, and it is available for everybody. And we hope that it's something that's beneficial to all of you. Okay, so use that as you need, and then make sure you do all this work and you finally find families that you have something in your hands that you can provide. And so this has been a challenge for some states where they're thinking, I don't have any resources to, maybe we just have our pamphlet. So IDRC has some resources. We have a student and family learning portal that we made for all states. And so this is basically a learning portal for all grades. There are resources for parents that have pre-K kids. There are websites that, I had another slide, I guess. There it is. There are websites that are helpful for all different ages. And we also have a training. If you go right to the front of the portal, again, it's on our front page. There's a training right there on exactly how to use it. We also have some language learning resources. Let me see if I can share a few more things. I think a lot of you know about these. I'll just do these really fast. On the front, this is our learning portal. And right here at the top is a language widget. So if I'm sharing this with a family, I can change into the language right there, whatever language they are or they use. And then the parent can view the website. Let me show the original so you know what it is. Maybe they have a second grader that's really having a hard time with writing. They can open this up, and this is kid-friendly resources, websites that they can use to improve their writing skills. So I have this, but we also have on our front page, you scroll down a little bit, we have all of the books that you can access. So you can print these. These are all language learning books. There are lots of different states resources on here. And so you can go in and you can use those. We just don't want you to go empty-handed. You should have some things that you're providing families from the start. And these are things that you can access that are totally free and available right now. Wilson also put in there, started offering the Farmer Spanish book from New York. At the same thing, we also have right there on the website, we have multiple books to learn Spanish. If you go here to the Recruiter resource page with the language, we have all of the books that are learning English, but below we have a Spanish survival guide, a practical Spanish one. These have been on there for several years, and we also have a Somali English dictionary. You can open this right up and it'll take you right to the book. And this guide also has what is helpful for our Spanish learners, the phonetics. This has for our English learners to be able to pronounce and say everything correctly in Spanish. And so we also had a state request resources for Swahili speakers, and we have a bunch of those below. So of course, those are available for everybody to use at any point. So Wilson, thanks for sharing that too. Okay, make sure I'm sharing the right thing. Check the chat box. So yeah, use those however you want. And then I know I've already mentioned this, just want to kind of touch on it a little bit. Make sure that the follow-up is done after the sweep. Assign someone to do that. Make sure that that is completed. Make sure that you give them that data that needs to be followed up in an organized manner, so that that's part of the process, that you have your people in the field know that while they're going throughout the day, they know that they're going to report on what they did. They're going to report on what they learned. They're going to report on what needs to be followed up. And so that's already part of what they're doing, so that it's easy to hand and say, hey, here's what needs to be followed up. Here's what happens. Here's what the needs were of the families that we met. Those kind of things you want to make sure that you have taken care of. So let's see. Okay, so I have my slides mixed up here. So in summary, just to kind of, we've mentioned a lot of different things, just kind of go through it and think about it. Behind everything you do, you want to be cost effective. You want to determine the need for the effort and make sure it aligns with being cost effective. And then we should always be organizing these to find migrant students, as many migrant students as we can. We want to have a plan, but we want to know that we might need to pivot. We might need to change if we go and I've seen this done too, where people have, it's a weekend and they're like, we're going to canvass farms on a weekend. In my mind, now that may work perfect in some areas, but in other areas that should all be housing. Like, you need to know that the plan that you're assigning, if you're on a Saturday, the work that you do might look very different than a Thursday. And so you want to have that plan really thought out. Do your homework before the effort to be prepared. Be ready to pivot and change plans as needed. Ask for those leads, resources, and referrals in the community, and document those so that you have those for the future. Be strategic about the training efforts that you're trying to provide. Think about the schedule. You're not just like, hey, Jessica, go canvass all these farms. Thinking, hey, this is what I know about the community. This is what I know that it's this time of year. It can be helpful to train, for example, about the specific type of work that they're going in. Like if it was nursery here where I live, there's different times of the year. Like they may ball trees where they dig out the roots of the tree in a big ball. They do that once it's frosted, once the leaves are no longer alive and they've all fallen off. So I would train people on the times, if I show up in a nursery and that's what they mainly do is dig those trees, I know that July is not a good time. And so you want to train on, have that person be as aware as possible of what's happening. There was a comment, Sundays are best in a lot of areas I go. After 6 p.m., the workers are back from shopping and available. So yeah, you want to know this is the best time. Whereas you could be on a sweep and say, you know what, it's 6 o'clock, I'm tired, I'm done, I'm going back to the hotel, when you could literally miss the very best time, to be out recruiting. To make sure you have a strong lead in the field that's organizing, that's really helping you in the field right there when it's happening. Take detailed notes for those who come behind you, and make sure you follow up with leads on anything promised. So these are some of our fundamental things we try to think of if we're helping a state with an effort. In years past, I knew that people would just be like, hey, I'm going to send recruiters to this area and see what happens. Then don't be surprised if you come back and you find 6 kids, because we have to do the homework. We have to be organized. Again, these same ideas apply if we're not doing an effort or sweep just in our own particular area that we're trying to canvass. So what should we be doing? How should we be doing it? How can we be effective with our time? All of these things we want to be thinking of. There was a comment here, we should include map points for clean and available restrooms in rural areas. Yes, that's a great idea. Yeah. So you may have additional things that you say, hey guys, pay attention to this. I know there were certain gas stations that I would always be like, I can go there, that one is clean. Or that would have like, if you don't have a lot of rural areas, you don't bring a lunch, there may, you may have to drive an hour away to try to get lunch. And so we would try to be strategic and think, all right, what's our closest place? Do we need to bring something with us? Or, that was another area. So bathrooms and food were something that was really important to think about. Okay, so I'm going to put our training evaluation in the chat box, but I also want to make sure if you have questions, if you can put those in. We always have to make sure that everything we do, we're evaluated on. And so we do very much review those. And if you have suggestions or topics that you want us to cover, we try to make sure that we're doing this, that we pay attention to it and that we're responsive to those needs. So we hope that this information is helpful. I know there's a lot of people that do really good sweeps out there and really good efforts across the country. I know that it can also be overwhelming when you're starting and you're not sure where to go. And so we were just hoping that some of these fundamental things would be helpful for everybody in there. So we'll leave the chat box up here for just a little bit and see if there's any comments. I will go ahead and stop recording.